Well, we're live. There we go. Oh, and we've already got 5 people. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you tuning in during our weird schedule where we have adapted for the bye week, and I'm taking a mini vacation. Very excited. And then we'll be back also after this episode on Sunday. But this is the episode where we're going to be talking about the Seahawks defense and the scheme and kind of an assessment looking back to 2022. Griffin has an improvised whiteboard, which is amazing.
I do. I do.
Yeah, damn right, Drew. I don't know why I look 6'6". I guess, just energy, camera position.
Maddie's got tall man energy. Yeah, so I do indeed have an improvised whiteboard. I have a whiteboard somewhere and I couldn't find it. So I took an old school binder and literally cut off one of the panels. And this is the part that has like the screen protector on it. And it functions like a whiteboard.
Your school binders must be very different to our school binders.
You guys even have different binders over there? Is there not one item, cultural artifact that binds us?
Who was it who said he had binders full of women? What American
That was
politician was that?
oh god, that was I can see his face for some reason. I can't say his name. Romney.
It was Mitty.
Mitt Romney. Yeah.
There we go. We don't have binders full of women.
We have binders full of playbooks.
Well, I don't know if we should admit that. Good morning from Thailand. That is amazing. Chicken God.
Hello, good morning. Wow.
What? So is
That's
that like
very
12
cool.
hours behind me? But I don't know what it is for you. I'm completely wrong on that.
You and I are 8 hours apart, right?
Yeah, it might be 16 hours from you and 8 hours behind me. I don't know. Let us know, Chicken God.
8 hours apart, but not in our hearts.
No. So, Griff, are you okay after the Welsh?
Well, what I don't understand is, I guess maybe I forgot, or is it new? Do you guys really break up your individual countries? I put countries in quotes for the World Cup. Like, do you guys really?
So essentially, Griff, when it suits us to break up our sports, we do. So, like football.
Now, I would imagine
Rugby.
though. Okay, but are you guys like diluting your talent though? Because are you guys talented enough in each region to do this and still compete at the world stage?
Well, I don't think England is concerned about the other ones, and we have the best team. So, and a lot of the Welsh players are technically English. They have Welsh family.
That makes sense because
so
you guys are
really
like
the
right
US
next to each
lost
other.
to England already before Friday,
which is fine. So
they didn't lose. But anyway, a tie is a loss in American terms.
Right.
I've come to understand.
So what's the population of Wales, give or take? Like 10, 15 million?
It's tiny, yes. That sounds a bit. That sounds a bit high, you know.
That's
It's
genuinely
3 million. Yeah,
3 million.
Yeah.
That's genuinely impressive because I imagine the best athletes in Wales play soccer, right?
No.
Like that's their sport?
No.
What sport do they play?
They play rugby, which is why I
Really?
tweeted that was a great game between a rugby nation and an American football nation.
That's even cooler that a population of only 3 million and their second best sport could outcompete a country that has 330 million people in it.
Yes.
At a sport.
Yes.
See, this is why we need to put. This is why LeBron James needs to teach his kids to play soccer.
No. This is the exact problem with the American thinking. Like, sure, your LeBron Jameses have probably like some incredible reactive athleticism, but football, soccer, there's technique involved, which I just don't think the American system is conducive to coaching. And I think there's a reason most of your best players have been to Europe.
So the number one sport among women in America is soccer.
Yes.
And aren't they like the best?
Yes, but
That's
that's because America, to its credit, has poured a lot of money and infrastructure into that, whereas the rest of the world, through its own fault, has not done that at all and has historically
so,
tried to
but
suppress women's soccer.
that makes sense. Which
Yes.
unfortunately that
But
makes sense.
America was sort of the first to really get into it, which is
So
great. And look at them, they're reaping the rewards. However, in 20 years' time, perhaps, I have a
things might
feeling
change.
that America will be down. But that's something to monitor. That's a very interesting thing.
But I'm just saying we put all of our money in men's sports into football and basketball
Mm,
and baseball.
mm.
Although you could argue that we're really not that like per capita, we're actually not that good at baseball compared to other countries
Yes.
that just go ham. Anyway,
That's part of it, yes.
socioeconomics really is at the core of most sport phenomenons. When you look at demographic splits, it really is just
Right.
socioeconomics.
Well, like
Anyway,
in Britain, there's no funding. The funding for like sports like basketball are actually really popular with like inner city kids. It gets cut because it doesn't fit the rich white policymakers. They don't
right,
like that sport.
right,
They like cricket
right. And the same
or
thing here goes for
rugby.
like lacrosse. Like lacrosse is very much you only find it in certain areas in the country. Can you imagine if LeBron James played lacrosse from day one? For example, you know what I mean?
That would be cool.
He'd be a monster. Anyway,
Right, everyone, tell a friend. We've done our other sports things. Get a friend in the stream, and here comes the intro. Very exciting. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where we are going to be diving into, using the bye week as a nice pause, the Seahawks defensive scheme, or the defensive state. Kind of halfway through the season, they've played 10 games now. They're 6-4. They have 7 games remaining. This complicated 17-game season. And Griff and I are going to dive into the numbers. We're going to explain some of the Seahawks concepts on defense. And we're going to tell you, how different is that to last year and where can Seattle improve moving forward. So Griffin, in terms of the pass coverage is fairly similar on a macro level to last year in terms of the concepts, because everyone in the NFL runs the same coverages and they kind of fit the trends.
Yeah. I feel like, when you try to bucket certain teams together, group them together, like this team runs this kind of defense, that team runs that kind of defense. The way you do that really is, I think first you look at like 2 high versus 1 high usage, like the global rates there, because obviously there are different 2 high coverages, different 1 high coverages, right? And then from there, maybe the other big global thing you look at is how often do they send pressure? Like how many times do they rush 4 versus rushing 5 or more? Seattle this year is for the most part doing what they did last year with regard to that. Last year, they were one of the most, heavy 2 high usage teams. They had like a rough 50-50 split, and this year they're the same. They're blitzing a little bit less. So the Carroll teams, even before last year and the year before that, even, they would always hover between under Ken Norton Jr., they hovered between like 20 and 30%. Well, 20 to 33%. Chris Richard got them up to like 20% when Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn were like 10 to 20%. So it steadily went up every year. And different reasons for that. I think Chris Richard did that because he realized he had the talent to play more cover one. So like in 2015, 16, 17, he was like, yeah, we can just play cover 3 all day. And they still could. But he said, let's play more cover 1. And if you're going to play cover 1, you get to toy around a little bit with, how you send pressure, how you disguise things. You'd be remiss not to.
Look how Dan Quinn's evolved in Seattle to make cover 1 basically his base coverage rather than cover 3 for the pressure reasons as well that you speak to.
Right, for sure. So, and then then Ken Norton Jr. took over, and then he kind of took that same base pressure rate and ran with it a little bit. Now, of course, he's not doing it from cover one usage because they lost a lot of their defensive back talent, right? And the depth.
Coleman got paid.
Coleman got paid. They had Jamar Taylor at nickel. They didn't really trust him. So, but they still wanted pressure. Now, they lost pass rush talent too. So they would send a lot of fire zones. Fire zone meaning you're rushing 5 instead of 4, and you're playing zone coverage behind it. And so that number would, be 24% one year, 28 the next, 33. Then last year it was 21. They dropped it down again. And then this year they've dropped it down even more. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I think, is that they like their 4-man rush. That's part of it. And then the other is that they are not seeing the necessity, and maybe this is a problem, and maybe it will become more of a problem, but it's kind of jury's out at the moment. They're not seeing the reason to blitz the run as much. Now, you were saying, well, you're blitzing the run, that wouldn't enter the sample, right? But you can blitz the run and it can be play action, so that you've now blitzed a pass, and that will be in the sample. So that's part of it. But also, they just don't feel the need to scheme up certain situations as much up front. And I think they just trust the personnel on the back end. But I think that's the core of it there. So those are the two main things. They're kind of living in the same general world as last year. So it's the changes therein where things get interesting.
Yeah, to your point about Ken Norton in 2021 in particular, running a lot of middle field open. As we've said on the podcast before, True Media had them running the 4th most middle field open in the league, the 4th highest percentage, and SIS had that as the 5th highest percentage. So this is something that they've been building towards anyway. And then on the blitz stuff, I think maybe the Buccaneers game was the first game where we were like, oh, they could have probably worked in some more pressures to alleviate certain issues, like the C gap bubble and bear. Move the front, close that, blitz into the teeth of a bootleg, etc., etc. And maybe going forward, if they do face teams, well, I think not even maybe, if they face teams where they expect, or see any C gap issues, teams will now know that counter, if they didn't already, which they should have done, but they'll try counter from heavy, say 21 personnel I formation into the C gap bubble of Seattle's bare front. And Seattle, as I choke because it's so disturbing to me, Seattle will need to close the C gap bubble. They'll need to have more schematic answers. So I don't think they'll repeat the issues that they had in Germany, where they got taken by surprise by the Buccaneers' tendency switch up. Right.
And we'll go into, with our trusty whiteboards, we'll go into like what the stock answers are for that C gap problem when they're in their bare space fronts.
Yes.
Like what checks they have, and then also where the classic fire zone that Matty's referencing here would also benefit. And they, like Matty, you said this in the post-game presser, not the post-game presser, the post-game recap and like the tape review of the Bucks game. They actually did throw 1 or 2 fire zones toward the end to the C gap. But again, like a little too little, too late.
And then, as I shameless plug here, but as I included in my Seahawks on Tape Substack article reviewing the state of the Seahawks defense via the Buccaneers game, Pete Carroll's press conference, where I got to ask him some questions, and then a Jordan Brooks mic'd up segment, Seattle ran against the Giants a 2 deep 4 under fire zone out of bear to because they're worried about they're more worried going into that Giants game about gap stuff. They actually didn't get the counter runs, I think, that were to be expected, but they had a few more schematic tools for dealing with that approach than they did against Tampa Bay. So, similar to last season, and it seems like Seattle started awful on defense for quite a while, but Seattle started really bad on defense. Then they made some adjustments, which we'll get to, and then they're back, right? They're playing good defense. The Germany game is weird, but they still only gave up 3 touchdowns, and one of those, there was offensive pass interference. Let's call it now. They waved that off bizarrely. So it wasn't too bad scoring points wise, and I think really that's kind of a freaky game where they just got caught out coaching wise, and it wasn't
Right.
the same issues. Like it was actually like rather than start of the season where you're like they just cannot play, they're not executing,
Mm-hmm.
they're just playing bad. This was more of hats off to the Tampa Bay staff. Leftwich has called a great game here. This is a fantastic game plan. They had enough good plays schematically to get it done, along with execution being there as well. So, Griff, this turnaround, what does the data say?
Yeah, so very similar last year and eerie in that the turnaround, the statistical turnaround anyway, occurred in week 6. So the first 5 games of the season were awful. Last year they were like 26th in efficiency the first 5 games, and then this year they were literally, I think, dead last or second to last. And then from weeks 6 to 10 last year, so then the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the 5 games following, they were like 7th or 8th in total efficiency. And then this year they're the same split. They're 5th in EPA per play total efficiency. So they were even worse to start the year this year than they were to start the year last year. Then they're even better in the 5 weeks following compared to the 5 weeks following last year. So it's kind of a weird inversion, but the theme is the same. Started bad, and then you get really good. And this year they've gotten even better than they got last year through to this point of the season. So yeah, standing right now, they're 5th in total EPA per play, 2nd in success rate. These stats are from rbsdm.com, Ben Baldwin's site. It's a really good resource. They're 8th in EPA per drop back,
This
5th
is
in drop
since week 6. Yeah.
since week 6. And the reason why I'm choosing this is because like they were as bad can be. I'm not saying like don't look at the total sample. I'm only saying this is where the theme picks up. So I'm not saying this
also
is where they are.
Griff, more than that, I have it on very good authority that week 6 is when the change happened, which we'll get to the change.
Exactly, yeah. So 8th in EPA per dropback, 5th in dropback success rate, and then 4th in EPA per rush and 1st in rush success rate, meaning the opposing success rate is 32nd in the league. So for the defenses, you flip it first, right? So it's like it mirrors last year. And then if you break it down by down, so last year, even like from week 6 on through the whole season, week 6 through 17, 18, whatever, they on first downs, they were top 10 versus the run in EPA and success rate. And then they were like 8th against the pass. So there was kind of this thing going around where Seattle was bad on early downs and then just really good on third downs. But really, they were good on first downs. They were mildly above average on third downs and then horrible on second downs. And that idea came from, well, if it's 2nd and 5, and you defend the 2nd and 3rd levels really well, but you don't defend the first level really well, and you play your same scheme that you did on 1st and 10, then the check down is going to convert a first down every time or close enough to it, right? And your efficiency is going to be horrible. But if you can survive 2nd down, the chances of them converting on you in 3rd down is poor. And if it does, then it's like the same proposition over again. So that's why those long drives were sustained against them. They had the same themes over this period, since week 6 figure split period, where they're amazing on first downs. They're mildly above average on third downs, and they're not as good on second downs. However, they're still like 10th on second downs. So while they're not like, I think they're like 3rd in total efficiency on first downs right now, that still falls to 10th. It still suggests they have the same kind of issue, but you still will take 10th over literally bottom 5 last year, right? So that's why I feel like this Bucks game isn't as much of like a breakdown game as that Cardinals game was last year after that Packers game last year, because their numbers on each down are good, and it's not just one thing carrying them. It's like they're just kind of good everywhere at the moment. So things are bound to catch up. And again, like you said, like that Bucks game lapse was really the way that they lost it. it's really not something that they're going to see again, where a team just 180s their philosophy and scheme on you. So like that's like, because again, like when we broke it down, they defended well what they expected. So theoretically, if they get a beat on what teams do, they're going to defend them well. Like they defended the Tampa Bay Bucks with Tom Brady on it well in the areas of scheme that they expected to see, right? It's like there's commentary there. So and I think, I don't know, Maddie, why do you think that they have kind of resolved their second down problem? Why do you think that they're better there? Because they're still good on first downs, they're still good on third downs. Why are they now better at second downs, even if not dominant, but better?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of factors, but I think it's hard not to go to the main reason being that technique change up front, which we were DMing after watching the Cardinals game, even like the live copy, and we were like, wait, they're doing the techniques up front, which they did last year, and they're not doing the Vic Fangio style 2-4-eye techniques in the bare front, where we're going to mirror step, kind of 2-gap. It's 1.5 gaps, but basically 2-gap, and play on the inside shoulder of a tackle. We're going to go back to last year in the bare front, where even if we're playing middle field open behind it, so a 2-high structure, we're going to play as often as we can get away with 2-3 techniques flanking the head up nose tackle, and play on the outside shoulder of the guard, power step, and play a lot more 1-gapping and forwards style. And even when they bump to a 4-eye technique, so back to the inside shoulder of the guard, say because there's a tight end there, say because they're on the open side of a formation and they've walked the edge player out to cover down on a slot, say to buy time for a safety behind them fitting from a deep quarter. Even then, their eyes and their was something you brought up, and their play just seems more downhill and through the tight end, even if they are still looking to play that 1.5 gap deal. Now, this change has been alluded to multiple occasions by Pete Carroll. It's been alluded to by Clint Hurt. Quandre Diggs mentioned it. Miles Adams told me in the locker room that they after the Tampa Bay game that this is something the players wanted. Quentin Jefferson, I believe, had some quotes on the subject as well. Like, they shifted back to how they were doing it in previous years. And as Carroll said, it suits their guys better. It's just what worked. It's cool that it's what Ken Norton Jr. was doing, what he learned with Pete at USC, and it's just working. It's just working, regardless of whatever your philosophy is schematically. Like, it's working, so they'll stick with it. But for me, Griff, that is the deal. They changed the techniques up front on the bear stuff. So,
which, as you're saying, lets them be more aggressive and generate more negative plays, and even if you're not getting a sack or killing the play outright with pressure, you're forcing them to check the ball down sooner, and then you can go and go tackle the check down before it hurts you. Or if they do get the ball out and they want to challenge you at the second or third level, pressure is going to, on average, in all likelihood, cause more inaccurate throws, and you can defend that better. So, there are dividends everywhere to that. But I mean, like, really, like, the pass rush just came alive, and then also, just the young guys are contesting more. They're being able to squeeze routes down. So that there's some really interesting things going on here.
Yeah, so on the pass rush coming back, is that because they're in more like second and longs?
That's a good question. I mean, with improved run defense, absolutely.
That's what you think, right?
Right. I mean, that has to. I haven't actually looked at those numbers, but I feel like that has to be part of it. I don't know how frequently teams are running on them or passing on them on 1st and 10 now compared to when they were. But if the average 1st and 10 literally goes for like 1.5 yards now, or whatever it is for them, then yeah, you get to bring out your guys on second and long, give them passing situations. I think on an individual basis, and it's probably stems to the systemic overhaul you're talking about. Daryl Taylor came alive after like doing nothing for the first month. Now he's doing stuff. Nwosu continues to be a monster, but then like the interior three, with the technique change, they're just dominating guys. They're getting one-on-ones. They can play more, they can knife gaps, the ball get off is better. Puna Ford is an impact pass rusher now. They're getting what they paid for to Quentin Jefferson, so like even on run downs, if they do key pass, they're in a better situation to do it. If you have Aaron Donald, you can put him in any technique, in any stance, have him put his eyes anywhere. It doesn't matter. And it can be a pass when he's expecting run. They're in a run front. He'll still get pressure because he's Aaron Donald. Same thing goes for Akeem Hicks when Vic Fangio had him. Same thing went for when Vic Fangio had Justin Smith in San Francisco. It's like some guys, it doesn't matter what positions you put them in. They're going to perform anyway. In Seattle's case, Puna Ford is a mildly above average passer, interior pass rusher. Quentin Jefferson is mildly above average. If Al Woods gets one-on-one with the center, he's going to bull rush him. Same thing for Brian Mona, right? So it's like, but when everybody on the line can perform to that level, if you have 5 guys that are mildly above average on the defensive line at any one point, at worst, right? Because Nwosu's well above that, right? For example, if you have 5 of those guys, there's no weak spot. So someone might get through any given snap. And like, this is the definition of an ensemble rush. Like, it's not 2-3 guys just decimating like it was with Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and Chris Clemens, right? Now it's just everybody's getting like a certain minimum threshold of pressure. And with 1 or 2 guys exceeding that. But I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And there's just this downstream effect of confidence. But some numbers though, unless Matty, you wanted to jump in.
Well, before the numbers, I should also say that the technique change, which happened since week 6, I see in the comments someone saying they're 2-gapping last week. Is that why they got hurt by the run? No, the technique change up front with the bare fronts, when you have 5 guys down at line of scrimmage, that happened notably on tape week 6, Arizona, and I may have had it confirmed to me that was when it happened, or may not. And what that also does is it helps out the linebackers behind, because for whatever reason, and Brooks in college had, as we were speaking about off air, Griffin, he had a great tape of playing off 4-eye, mirror stepping, kind of 2-gapping guys, playing A gap to C gap in that tight front, like the spread tight front college football edition. He had all of that. Barton did a bit of that in college as well. But for whatever reason, the linebackers, as soon as Seattle's moved back to this more 1-gapping, power stepping approach up front in the bear deal, the linebackers are playing quicker, they're taking the shots more, they're kept clean more reliably. They're not having to sort of dance off a guy who, he could pop into the B, but he could get into the C, or what gap is he going to go? It's just that the picture is clearer for them, and they're taking advantage of it. And
yeah,
so it's really helped the second level too.
They're literally allowed to charge up field, when before they're playing stack track fallback, almost not quite, because they still have 1-gap principles, but almost like ball fit philosophy, where you're not fitting a gap anymore. You're fitting the running back based off of how the blocker in front of you is doing. So it's subjective now. And that asks of you to play more laterally and, press 1 gap and then be ready to fall back. So because
the timing and chemistry just wasn't there with that.
It wasn't there. And like, you have to keep your depth so that you can go behind your defensive tackle if needed. You don't get to go charge and hit a gap, unless you are gapped out, but so often, or in a 1-high defense, that is. Because you can be gapped out and be in a 2-high defense, but to make that work, you have to toy with the techniques like what you're talking about, and it just wasn't working. But what they're doing now is working. Like, they can get the linebackers playing aggressively in 2-high structure and not be unsound. Not that last gap is still accounted for somehow. So
give me the numbers, Griff. What
all right,
numbers are interesting here?
So this is where it gets really funny, because I'm going to present something that is identical to last year, and then we're going to talk about how that can possibly, how they are still able to be better on second down. So last year they were 7th in EPA per target to what receivers and tight ends from the week 6 on mark, and then they were like bottom 5 against running backs. The other way to look at it is that they were like, I think they were 6th on EPA per dropback on passes that traveled over 5 yards last year. And then, like, again, bottom 5 on targets that went below 5 yards. So the conclusion there is they defend the second and third level really well. And then they can't defend the check down, or they can't defend running backs or screens. Now, we posited endlessly last year that was because that wasn't an inability to defend the running back skill set so much as it was like a symptom of not having enough pass rush, because then the play would extend and the second level would be literally further away from the check down. It became like a geometry problem. Like, it was literally just proximity. So this year, despite being way, like, literally a bottom 5 team to a above average team on second down, where the check down would hurt them the most, this year they are again 6th in EPA per dropback versus receivers and tight ends, and somehow 32nd in the league against running backs. So they have the same problem. So how mathematically are they improved on second down? Well, this is how. The target rate last year on check down throws last year, or throws below, let's just say 9 yards, they were 73% of their targets went there, which was like top 5 in the league of how frequently they were targeted below 9 yards. This year, they're being targeted 65% of the time. So they've dropped like 8%, and now they're like clustered with the median, which is still high, but that's where most throws go, right? They go short. They have increased the rate that they've been targeted at the intermediate. They've gone up to 24% this year, and they were 16% last year. Last year, the target rate to the intermediate, 16%, was like the second lowest in the league. Just nothing was open. They didn't even bother. This year, they're clustered in the middle again at 24%, but they're still defending it really well. So the question is, so that's how they're getting the numbers. They're just as bad defending the first level this year as they were last year, but they're not being targeted at the first level as frequently. So the question is, why are they being targeted more at the second level? And the only way I know how to answer it is that the way they're playing cover 3 now, they're playing cover 3 roughly at the same rate. But the way they play cover 3 now that they're playing, they're matching 2 seams. While the coverage is good, one-on-one looks are perhaps more targetable, even if they're covered. And I think quarterbacks are seeing, okay, I'll give my guy a chance. And then just their defenders are simply winning at the catch point, and a combination of pass rush is causing more inaccurate throws at the second level. That's the only reason I can think, because otherwise,
I was going to say the pass rush is perhaps better, and so it could be evidence of the pass rush actually doing work to prevent the quarterback getting to the third or tertiary, the check down.
That's a good point. They're just not holding the ball.
And instead of holding the ball. But then the cover 3 thing, as you've put in the notes as well, I guess, it clamps up on the running back a bit more in the flat. It's not always going to be encouraging the check down, like you've said. It's going to perhaps cover a check down tightly depending on how they match it up. That's the big change which happened from the start of the season and they've gone with throughout, is they're running Fangio's style of cover 3, where it is similar to Ripley's Nick Saban match, where they match both seams, as you've said.
Yeah. Now there is one caveat to this. So last year they were a bottom 3 team defending screens within the running back targets. This year, with the screen, if you filter in just screens to running backs, they're like defending them at the 9th best. So like they're defending screens better, which actually matches an anecdotal view of the tape, I think.
Yeah,
it's just
definitely
it's the non-screen targets to running backs that they can't defend. So really, it's the checkdowns and dropbacks that they're having. They still have spacing issues. Now, I would argue though that they've been better spaced for them. They just aren't tackling it. Like last year, it was a proximity problem, not a tackling problem. This year feels like the opposite. Like Kobe Bryant probably has 5 missed tackles in the flat. Brooks has had a couple of where he's had to come from way
Neil
far
a
out.
few.
Brian Neal a few. Cody Barn actually doesn't have many missed tackles. He has one really bad one that stands out in mind in that Detroit game. But beyond that, he actually isn't missing tackles.
And that wasn't so much in the flat. That was like just not keeping up with the crosser.
Right. So it's just a little bit of the kind of the same things going on, but the way that offenses are attacking them, and maybe it's a positive effect of having better pass rush. I thought it would be the other way around, but offenses still want to go to the second level. Like you said, if they see a read but they feel pressured, they're hurrying the throw at the intermediate as opposed to hurrying themselves to get to the check down, I guess.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It was really revealing. So schematically though, they're still 50-50. And the main difference though is they're playing less cover 2 and they're playing even more cover 6 or technically cover 8 this year. So last year they ran half quarter cover 2 to their strength, quarters backside at like the 8th highest rate, which was only like 14% of their snaps, but was still really high. This year, they're running it at 27% of their snaps. So really, they chewed into almost all of their cover 2 snaps and replaced it with even more cover 6, which is good for the second highest rate of the
Again,
league.
that matches the tape. But I think maybe there's a spattering of plays where it actually was cover 2, but you don't realize because they run so much cover 6. But I could it seems like a handful of cover 2 plays for this season. It's all quarter half or half quarter.
Right. And they only play quarters and like base when they're in the true 3-4 base.
Like as in pure cover 4, you mean?
As in cover 4, like quarters to both sides, and they just don't play a lot of 3-4 base. So therefore they don't play a lot of pure quarters.
Yeah.
Because they're always clouding one side.
Yeah.
Making it cover 6.
So digging into the main calls, seemed at the start of the season with the techniques going on up front, they basically had the bare front where they'd do quarter half and send the wheel, so tight wheel 6, which is like Fangio's main base answer for stopping 21 personnel, bit of 12, but mainly 21 personnel I formation stuff. And then their switch up was tight saw fire zone, where they'd send both edges and then play 3 deep 3 under coverage behind it. But with the technique tweak up front, and I think them sort of finding their rhythm, anecdotally, it seems they've moved more towards running more like cover 3 and less tight wheel 6. But
they are playing
they run so little base that it's hard to really draw a conclusion from that. I'd have to go through and chart, but I think the big thing is just with the 3-4 base where they're running bare, they change their techniques and it's helped them.
Yeah. So do we want to get into whiteboard stuff?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's dig straight into nickel.
Okay, so nickel is where there's a 5th defensive back on the field. Seattle's nickel, that is Kobe Bryant, obviously. Now, the big thing this season in 2022 is what player leaves the field. Because historically with Seattle, the Sam linebacker would lead the field in the 4-3, and they very rarely changed that up. That was always the convention. They'd move from a 4-3 into a 4-2-5 personnel grouping. Heck, sometimes if you really wanted to get pedantic, you could say it was a 3-3-5 because the Sam moved down to defensive end. But really, it's a 4-2-5. Now, this year, because Seattle is... actually, last year as well, Seattle had this thing called Falcon, which was their nickel bare front, where the will linebacker played down as the 5th guy at the line of scrimmage. You remember Jordan Brooks was doing that? Yeah. And they had a middle linebacker behind, and then they had their nickel. So that's still technically 45 personnel, but in a
It's
5-1, 5-3 kind of look.
right.
Now this year, because Seattle's a 3-4 team, and because they're really embracing the bare looks, we get a bit funkier with the nickel stuff, and there's a few more different looks.
Yeah, so this is I don't know how convenient this is, and this only works for the YouTube crowd anyway.
No,
Um,
that's perfect. So Griffin's holding up a drawing,
Perfect.
which you should check out on YouTube. It's at Matty F. Brown. But if you are listening, it's a 5 down front with which we that would be called. Well, you've drawn a bear front. That would be called Griff. You've drawn a 5-1-5, right?
Yeah, this is 515. So
Right.
this is like their main. This is their main, like kind of nickel call, really. And I drew this up against 2-by-2 formation, where meaning you've got two eligible receivers on one side, two on the other side, and then I didn't draw the quarterback and running back. We'd have the running back in the backfield to be your fifth eligible. And so the main consideration, and so this is I didn't draw the coverage rules, but this would be the main call we'd see here would be half quarter. So to the nickel side, right there. So you've got the cornerback here playing a flat. So he's your flat defender. And then you've got the free safety playing a half. So he's going to like, if both the slot defender and the X receiver are vertical, he's going to play like midpoint them and play the deepest route and then be ready to break on the ball if the quarterback throws. The nickel is kind of playing the vertical hook where if number 2 is in the seam, or say he goes under, that way, he's going to get depth and look for kind of like to 10 to 15 yards, look for an inbreaker for the number 1 receiver, which is the X. Or he might, if the slot goes up the seam, he would kind of inside carry that slot defender. Now Ugo Amadi would almost completely man turn with that and like get in the hip pocket. Now Kobe
I missed
Bryant,
that.
me too. Kobe Bryant isn't. Now he's getting a lot of depth and he's peaking the receivers, but he's almost maintaining a pedal and staying like square to the line of scrimmage. And I think the reason why they can get away with that is because the pass rush is improved. So that ball is coming out sooner.
Although in the last 2 games he's been showing a bit of outside leverage matching and running with it, which so it's obviously a game plan thing. Now to that point on the front, Griffin's calling it a 5-on-5, which it basically is. However, the Fangio tree would consider that 3-3-5 because the 2 edge defenders are technically outside linebackers, and you might have heard that called penny personnel,
Right.
which just for the sake of being nerdy. Now, as Griff says, they have the half quarter. Were you talking through? And the quarter half, and because Griff's drawn it up to 2-by-2, I mean, it depends what side they call the strength off, but basically, that's their main deals where you get cover 4 to the strong side, cover 2 to the weak side, or you get cover 2 to the strong side, cover 4 to the weak side, and half quarter Seattle would call cover 8, and quarter half Seattle would call cover 6. But in nickel, cover 6 is called stuff, which is confusing because in other systems, stuff is cover 8.
Yeah, it does get confusing. Okay, but so finish it off really quick. You've got the Mike, who would be Jordan Brooks, right there in the middle, right? The M. God, all right.
Yeah. He plays the A gaps.
He plays the A gaps. He kind of fits off the nose. If you've got pullers, he has to track the puller. But in coverage, he's playing the middle hook. And if the running back pretend he's in there, if he goes strong that way, Brooks would push to the imaginary hash that's definitely on this whiteboard, and he would look for inbreakers from the slot or the X receiver. And he's been really good at the middle hook. Yeah, and he's been really good at sussing out like dagger combinations this year.
Yeah.
Now on the backside, they're playing quarters. So the cornerback, kind of like cover 3 technique, is just playing, he's responsible for the deep route from Z. And then the safety is playing a quarter on the Y receiver. So if he goes vertical, he's got him. If he goes underneath, he's looking to rob the number 1 and get double coverage with the corner. If this was trips formation where the tight end is on the other side, then this guy is looking to poach front side, and he plays the final 3 that would come this way. And Brooks is free to just kind of, look for inbreakers. Now they can game plan that, and they can have the strong safety who would be Neil double coverage the 1 if he's a problem. And then Brooks would be the one to close off the middle of the field. So they can do different things. But I think the main discussion here is you feel you're good. The reason why you play this is that you feel good against verticals because you've got 2 deep safeties and you have different ways to cover all of it, right? And then your front, you're in a big bear front, so you can stop the run. So you feel balanced. You're like, okay, we can take care of explosives and we can defend the run. That's kind of the statement you're making. And then you have the techniques between your nickel and Mike. They can help contest things and match routes in the intermediate, right? The main drawback from this picture is that in a 4-man rush, your spacing is bad. It's not as good as a 4 down front. And why is that? Is because, well, you're not rushing all 5 every time. One of them has to drop. So if you drop 1, that means if you drop this guy, which is who you're dropping most of the time, that end, then that means these 4 are rushing. The problem there is 3 of the 4 guys are 300-pounders, and most 300-pounders aren't good pass rushers. And then even then, this guy has to expand out to the C gap to get your contain. And it's like, so you have a personnel problem and a spacing problem. So your 4-man rush is really bad. And if the whole purpose of playing a 2 high shell is to defend the pass, well, what if your pass rush is so bad that it undoes the efforts in the back end, right? Like it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit. Like something's got to give. So this is where you have to. This is kind of where the magic is made, and where Clint Hurt the last 4 weeks has been making his money. Because so how you do that is, okay, you've got 5 guys, at least toy with who the 4th rusher is, make the offense guess, or don't let them.
And that's important as well, because like you if they start realizing what side you're rushing from, which is one of the downsides to, I think, what happened in 2021, despite Ken Norton's best efforts, I think offense just started working it out what side the 4th rusher was coming from. But when you have 5 guys down at the line of scrimmage, the stock protection call you'll get is man protection. They'll go big on big, and they'll use 1 offensive lineman for each of the 5 guys down at the line of scrimmage. Now, you have to mix it up. You have to do, if you're rushing 4, you can take advantage of that man coverage and try and negate the disadvantageous rush angles and disadvantageous, 300-pounders rushing by running games and picks and rubs to separate against those protections. And Griff, Clint Hurt has done a good job of that, really.
He has, yeah. So to the side, like you said, you're most likely forcing man protection. To the side that you are, the edge that you are rushing, to ensure that he gets a clean 1-on-1. So either you've done a good enough job in toying with who the 4th rusher is and who the 7th dropper is of your 2 outside linebackers, like who's coming and who's dropping. If you've done a good enough job with that, you've probably forced man protection, and that means you get a 1-on-1. So at least that liberates the guy that you are rushing to get the best chance possible to give your collective 4-man rush the best chance. If you haven't done that, then, and they've figured out who's rushing and who isn't, then that means they're probably half sliding or maybe even 4-man sliding to that side as the contingents, 4-man sliding to the edge rusher that is rushing. The contingency for that is, in this picture, who, regardless of who's rushing and who's dropping, to whatever side that is, the near 3 technique. So if this is this guy, this guy's this edge, this outside linebacker is rushing, the near 3 technique to as the contingency against the offensive line sliding that way, and which would negate the one-on-ones you're getting. Instead, you get 4-on-3 instead of 1-on-1 everywhere. This 3 technique is stunting that A gap so that the guard feels compelled to kind of stay heavy on him. Even if he's sliding, he would give a little help. And then as he is stunting that A gap, the nose tackle, he is going over it. And one, that's just good. It's a good twist movement. That's if it is man protection, it's hard on a twist, interior twist, or hard on man protection. But also it ensures that this edge, that guy, can just keep his one-on-one at all times. So if you watch them,
he's your best rusher. Like, you don't, again, you want him to have the easiest job, really, because he's your main rush threat.
right? So both of those elements, toying with who's rushing and who isn't, and then when you do rush, having the 3 technique in the nose to the side of the edge rusher, run that twist, gives them the best chance. And if you guys watch the games and you see, okay, Taylor just dropped, Nwosu rushed, the 3 technique to Nwosu's side is spiking that A gap, and then either Al Woods or Mona is looping over him. And they do that every time. Now, the question of how do they play with who's rushing and who isn't, I messed up the picture here a little bit, but the offense would look at this picture, look at the 2 high shell presentation, and they would say, assuming that they maintain that pre-snap 2 high look, I know that this guy's rushing and that guy isn't. And that's because if he isn't rushing and you're dropping him, you're then saying, okay, that means he would have to go to the middle. I can't do this. Good Lord.
Yeah.
He would have to drop to the middle. The Mike would have to drop weak, and then the nickel would stay where he is. And there's no way you're going to have him in a 2 high shell play the middle hook and basically run down the middle. There's just no way.
And there's no one covering down on the wide tight end on the other side.
You're asking him to get all the way out, and that's impossible.
The numbers don't match. He has to fit an A gap. He can't do that unless you're disguising lots, and teams know that Seattle doesn't really do it like that. So
right. So therefore they know who's rushing. They know this guy's rushing and they know this guy's dropping. So Clint Hurt has to ask himself, how do I force them to believe that he's rushing? And it's a 4-man rush. Like, we're not talking about 5-man rushes yet, which is part of that answer. The way to do it is, okay, we are going to drop him, but then that means the coverage shell has to change so that he indeed is not running down the middle. And then that's where you get the bonus fire zones, Matty, that you've talked about endlessly.
Yeah. So I believe with what you've drawn up is perfect, really, because they have a call called Penny Whiskey, where the weak outside linebacker drops. They play cover 3. Now they play a cover 3 fire zone, so the 3 underneath players, one of them is playing a seam curl flat, matching up on the number 2. The linebacker Brooks is playing in the middle hook. He's relating to the 3, and the nickel is relating to his 2 in the seam curl flat. And so from that same look, they can drop the other outside linebacker, rush the other outside linebacker. And the dropping outside linebacker, what makes it a bonus fire zone is he just doesn't have a job, really. He just drops in a bonus hook, which really helps out the nickel, because the nickel knows, like, I can kind of overplay the vertical and overplay the out because I've got this help to the inside. It's like a really underneath help layer, just to alleviate some stress and like force you not to have to worry about like a short throw or the check down.
Right.
And this is like a perfect example of how Penny 8 and Penny Whiskey, they alternate off each other. They both work together, and
it's their main change-up call to their main look out of the 5-1-5 look.
And so something to watch for when you're watching a game is, hey, are they in this 5 down look with a nickel out there? Oh, did the end to the nickel rush or did the end to the nickel drop? And I guarantee you, if the end to the nickel rushes, it will be a middle field open look. And if the end to the nickel drops, it will probably be kind of middle field closed looking.
Now, this is technically not a bonus fire zone because that's the spacing of the coverage is identical though, which is what I should have said earlier. But they do this change-up call often enough that over the course of a game, when offenses are charting and scouting defenses, the threat of either linebacker rushing is established. So not only does it help them in the moment, but it helps the rusher that is rushing. They're benefited by the fact that they're probably forcing man protection. So like there's a systemic effect here, and then it makes, the coverage better, and then it makes the, it affects everything. But that's like their main first down behavior. And that's how they're able to maintain a 4-man rush really when they are in bare spacing. Because again, the whole point of them playing the amount of 2-4 or 4-2 looks that they were doing this year was to get pass rush. And it clearly, like, the whole big picture wasn't working. So they retreated, like you said, to the techniques and stuff that they did last year. And then they're left with the same problem. Well, you're disadvantaged in pass rush. So this is how these things, that the stunt and toying with who the rusher is and who the dropper is how they're able to win back the lost advantages of the pass rush when they're in it. Now, the other thing, I'm not going to get into it at all. The other thing is you just rush both of them, and then you spin down Ryan Neal, and then he's just playing basically a match on that seam, and you have 3 deep and 3 under fire zone. And that's the other way you establish it. And you can get into your fire zone rules really easily because you're now a Rip Liz team, and cover 3, you're carrying both seams anyway. You're just losing a hook defender.
Yeah, I believe, and Coach Vass obviously does great work. And if you haven't checked him out and you're into this your scheme side of it, you should. And a lot of my Fangio knowledge comes from Vass, so check him out. But
Same.
I believe he was saying that Capers and therefore Fangio, they learn cover 3 like
from their fire zone.
Rules. Yeah. They like did it backwards. So they came up with the fire zone first, and then they installed the cover 3, and so they just ran cover 3 matching wise. So there we go.
Yeah.
Now we've talked for a while, Griff, and there are still other calls to get into. If you enjoyed this, let us know, and we'll dive into these other calls at a later date at some point.
I think
their 3-3-5 mint stuff, and we have their 2-4-5 nickel kind of deal, which is actually a really major part of the defense, which we've just run out of time on. But
I think what we could do is we could also just spend looking at basic runs against these fronts and how they fit it. And like,
we could definitely spend time doing that.
Because when we talk about like bubble issues, which we did a little bit, we spent a lot of time in the Bucks tape podcast. We can do the same thing with the whiteboard, each of us, and we can show where the bubble becomes a huge problem in certain fronts, like against certain runs. Like we can do like an episode dedicated to that as well.
Yes, sir. Right. Now, Michael Slicker, you said, Matty, can you please say water bottle? I hope that satisfied you. You better like the video after that. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back on Sunday with our reaction to the Raiders game. Did they play the Raiders?
Yeah. Predictions. We didn't even preview them. The Raiders are bad. The Seahawks are good.
The Raiders are rather bad, yes.
One thing to look for that game is Max Crosby versus Abraham Lucas is the biggest test of Abraham Lucas's life so far.
And the cover 8 kind of deal that Griffin has broken down for us, they'll probably try and run that to Devontae Adams. There are also tools that Seattle has in their system to basically make sure they play the cover 2 side to the threat and bracket him kind of deal if he's in the slot with like a cover 4 look. And I'm sure we'll see that. It was kind of wild, actually. Denver, they kind of just let Surtain get it done against Adams, and at the end he got done. But that was an interesting one to play out, given that Denver is a similar system to Seattle. I don't think Seattle will do that. So that'll be a great matchup, but the the spread for this game is Seahawks Raiders spread. The Raiders are plus 3.5 underdogs, which that feels generous given they're 3-7 and it's in Seattle. But anyway,
the ESPN predictor thinks the Raiders have a 51.4% chance of winning to Seattle's 48%.
wow.
With
Now,
with
what
a
maybe
0.6% chance of a tie.
yes, and what's really good about this game, I guess, is the Raiders found something against Denver in that they were running 21 personnel, I formation, counter, and gap style runs, which, oh my word, that's similar to what Tampa Bay did to Seattle. So this can be a redemption game for Seattle in that sense, and the coaching staff for carrying more answers for that, and then also defending Devontae Adams. But
We'll see.
Las Vegas's defense looks awful. Like they're in that very much Patrick Graham year one phase where they can't really get into the things they really want to do yet, and they're still sort of finding their way. And they're also just talent deficient in key areas. They just can't overcome it. So then again, they are running more middle field closed, I think, and so with Seattle's issues against that kind of deal, like on offense, struggling. Getting slow against like cover 3 bars, maybe that crops up again.
Perhaps.
Did you do a prediction, Griff?
I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, do it right now. Do it right now. You won't.
31-7 Seahawks.
No way.
Yeah.
That was my prediction.
Yeah. No, real prediction is 34-10 Seahawks.
Wow. The over under is 47.5.
I would take the under on that.
Yeah, that seems crazy high, especially given I'm saying it's going to be 31-7 to Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow the Twitter at Seattle Overload, follow Griffin at CMikeSpinMove, follow our producer at Ty Dane Gunzlers, follow me at Matty F. Brown, leave a 5-star review. We had some really nice reviews. Like they're very nice. Thank you. And tell a friend about the podcast. Keep downloading the podcast. Keep us overloading. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Yeah, well, hold on.